The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence that breathes relief, but the kind that presses against the lungs. A single overhead light cast a narrow beam onto the witness stand, carving the room into two realms, shadow and truth. Keanu Reeves stepped forward. His black suit clung to a frame that had known decades of cinematic battles and silent revolutions. His eyes, darker than the mahogany wood surrounding him, swept over the gallery. He did not blink. He did not smile. He simply existed, like a shadow brought to life. Across the aisle, seated at the defense table, was Sean Diddy Combs, his fingers clasped together, jaw clenched, head slightly bowed as if he were praying or calculating. The two men did not exchange a single word, but the air between them bent as though it knew what was about to be said would not be forgotten. A cough echoed in the gallery. The judge gave a nod, and Keanu began. "I was invited to a dinner," he said, his voice as smooth as snowfall and just as cold. It was supposed to be just dinner. The court leaned in, pulled not by scandal, but by gravity. No one had expected Reeves to testify. No one had imagined the man known for silence would be the one to crack open the case. "I received an invitation through a mutual contact. No agents, no PR, just a note. It said, private dinner. No devices, just creatives. The address led me to a compound in the Malibu hills. I thought maybe it was a pitch meeting. Maybe it was art." He paused. The room waited. But that night wasn't about art. It was about allegiance. Behind him, the courtroom wall held portraits of past judges, silent witnesses to history. Their gazes seemed to narrow as Keanu's voice began to drop, just slightly, like a curtain lowering on the first act of a play that was never meant to be seen. I arrived at the gate. There were no cars, no photographers. Just one man, security. He took my phone. Said, "No devices allowed." I remember his face. Stone still. Not aggressive. Just empty. I should have turned around. He looked toward the jury now, 12. Strangers staring into the bones of his truth. But I didn't. Inside the estate, the hallway was dim, lit only by candles scattered along the floor like offerings. A faint sound drifted from hidden speakers. Music, orchestral, slow. The smell of incense, rose and sandalwood, hung in the air like a warning no one could read. Diddy was standing at the head of a long dinner table. Alone. Smiling, he said, "Delighted you succeeded. No staff. No wine poured. No dishes on the table. Just two chairs and a black folder placed between them like a contract in a temple." It didn't feel like Hollywood. It felt like theater. Ritual. Like I'd walked onto a set I couldn't leave. Keanu took a slow breath. "I'm not here to talk about fame or power. I'm here because what was asked of me that night, it wasn't metaphorical. It was bodily, spiritual, contaminating." Another pause. The prosecutor asked, "What was he offering?" Keanu's eyes moved to Diddy, finally. And for the first time, the courtroom saw not an actor and a mogul, but two men caught in the crosshairs of a truth too heavy to carry. "He offered me legacy," Keanu said, "in exchange for something I will never do." The judge nodded slowly. "Mr. Reeves, can you clarify what that was?" Keanu's voice did not shake. "He asked me to bathe in his used water." Gasps burst like gunshots through the courtroom. Reporters' pens froze mid-sentence. Someone dropped a phone. Even the sketch artist stopped drawing. And for a moment, the room itself seemed to stop breathing. The black gates of the Malibu estate creaked open without a sound, as if they had been expecting him for years. Keanu's car eased forward on a gravel path lined with cypress trees, tall and unmoving like sentinels of something ancient. No valet, no greeter, just the crisp air and the quiet hum of tension building. He stepped out, his boots pressing into the gravel like a countdown. A security guard stood at the threshold of the house, clean-shaven, unsmiling, in a dark suit that fit too perfectly to be off the rack. He held out a gloved hand. "Phone." Keanu hesitated. The guard did not. Reluctantly, Keanu handed it over. The device vanished into a black velvet pouch, sealed and wordless. A hand motioned him forward, and that was all. Inside, the air was heavy. Not thick, but deliberate, like someone had engineered the scent, the lighting, the very pacing of the space. The corridor ahead was narrow, walls a muted gray, lit only by flickering candles and brass holders. Shadows danced along the edges like they had a language of their the end of the hallway. A room opened up into a vaulted chamber. A table stretched the length of the room, carved from black walnut and waxed to a mirror sheen. Two chairs, a single black folder between them, and at the head of it all, Diddy stood waiting, his silhouette carved out by soft amber light above, delighted. "You succeeded," he said again, the exact same line Keanu had already recounted in court. But here, in the memory, it echoed louder, more rehearsed, more loaded. There was no meal, no servers, no music now, just silence thick enough to chew. Keanu took the offered seat. "I imagine you have questions," Diddy said, eyes gleaming. Keanu said nothing. He had come here expecting a pitch, maybe even a cultish vanity project. But this felt rehearsed beyond artistry. It felt orchestrated like a ceremony. His instincts screamed, but his curiosity, it leaned in. Diddy poured 2 glasses of deep red wine from an unlabeled bottle and slid one across the table. "Let's talk legacy," he said, voice syrup smooth. Keanu watched the wine bead against the glass. "Legacy? Yes." Diddy sat back, fingers laced under his chin. "Not career, not fame. Legacy. The kind that reshapes you. The kind they can't take away because it isn't built in public. Still no script. No talk of characters or roles. Just that folder on the table, untouched." Keanu gestured to it. "That the pitch?" Diddy smiled wider. "No, that's the threshold." Keanu opened the folder. Inside, one black page. No logos, no letterhead. Just 7 bullet points, each written in pale gold ink, like commandments that he read them slowly, aloud. "Even when you cannot see, you must trust the process. You will speak of this to no one, that you will be reborn as you enter the water. You will not question. Legacy is earned, not given. You must cleanse. Loyalty endures forever." Keanu looked up, incredulous. "What is this?" Diddy didn't blink. "A doorway. Into what?" Diddy leaned forward, voice low and reverent. "Into the second half of your life." The flames on the candles flickered, as if recoiling from the weight of those words. Keanu's chest tightened. Was this performance? Cult? Madness? Or something far worse? Something carefully, meticulously real? "I'm not interested in metaphors," Keanu said. "Neither am I," Diddy replied. And then, with a single motion, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, black, oval stone. He placed it gently on the table. "Take this," he said. "When you step into the bath, bring it with you." Keanu didn't touch it. "Bath?" he asked, voice suddenly dried. Diddy's eyes narrowed, but his smile remained. "Yes, it's been drawn. Warm. Waiting. My assistant will prepare it after I leave. When I go, you go in." Keanu's throat closed. "You're not serious." "I am," Diddy whispered. "Water holds memory, Keanu. We're all connected through it. That's why it matters who you share it with." The room was too still. Thought this was some kind of project," Keanu said, voice rising ever so slightly. "It is," Diddy replied. "You." Keanu stood, not abruptly, but with a slowness that screamed decision. He looked down at the stone, then at the man who had placed it there so casually, as though asking someone to step into his filth was an ordinary price of entry. "Thank you for dinner," Keanu said quietly. He turned as he walked away. Diddy called out, voice playful, unbothered. "You'll come back," he said. "They always come back." Keanu did not respond. That he walked out into the night, the door sealing behind him like the final scene of a play he refused to act in. The sky outside had gone dark in a way only California nights could, still, rich with hidden stars, but oppressively silent. Keanu's car hummed softly down the canyon roads, but his mind was roaring. That he drove with the windows up, both hands on the wheel, yet nothing about the motion felt real. The folder, the black stone, the words, "You will be reborn as you enter the watered," it circled in his head like a chant he had not asked to hear. By the time he reached home, the sealed velvet pouch containing his phone was still warm in the passenger seat. He stared at it for a long moment before touching it, half expecting it to burn. When he pulled out the phone, there was something else tucked inside. A gold-trimmed card, black as ink, elegant as death. "Loyalty is tested in water." That was all it said. His hand closed into a fist. Keanu tried to move on. For the next few days, he forced himself into the rhythm of work, scripts, meetings, fittings. He told himself it had just been a twisted Hollywood joke, a social power game, a test of obedience. Nothing more, but his instincts had never felt so violated. He did not speak of the dinner, not to his assistant, not to his agent, not even in the quiet corners of his journal. He buried it like a bad dream, hoping silence would bleach it from memory. Then came the call's point 3 days later. At exactly 3:17 a.m., his landline rang. N01 called that number. It was listed under an alias, buried beneath layers of privacy that he reached for it instinctively, groggy but alert. Hello. Silence. Then a breath. Not fast. Not panicked. Just one long, deep inhale, like someone savoring the moment. Then nothing. The line went dead. Keanu sat in the dark, the receiver still pressed to his ear, heart pounding that he waited for a second call. It did not come, but 2 nights later, it did again. Same time, same breath, and again, and again. 5 calls, all from blocked numbers, all at 3:17. All the same ritual. The silence wasn't empty. It was precise. Something was listening. Point one morning, as he stepped out to his garage, he noticed a small envelope tucked beneath his windshield wiper. Black paper, gold wax seal, no name. Inside, a single sheet. Old parchment-like texture. The words were handwritten in a sharp, slanted hand. Unfinished rituals have consequences, signed with a single letter. There was no address. No watermark. No trace of who had touched it last. Keanu felt it then. Not fear, but corrosion. Like something ancient and wrong had latched onto him that night. And now it was seeping into his world. He tried reaching out to the few people he trusted. His agent was first. A loyal man, older, calm. When Keanu finally confessed the dinner to him in clipped, reluctant pieces, the agent listened in silence. Then he said, "If you didn't sign anything and you didn't speak, forget it ever happened." Pause. But Keanu looked up. "There are people out there," his agent added, "who don't like hearing no, especially if they think you were already one of them." Keanu leaned back in his chair, the stone in his stomach growing heavier by the minute. That phrase echoed through his skull for days. One of them, he wasn't sure what that meant, but he was starting to suspect it had nothing to do with the movies, and everything to do with the invisible current beneath the surface of everything he thought he understood. At first, it felt like coincidence that a project slipped through, minor. A cameo role in a big-budget sequel got canceled. They said it was a scheduling issue. Another director stopped returning calls. His assistant said he had gone overseas. Nothing unusual, nothing headline-worthy, but it kept happening. A mid-budget indie film Keanu had signed onto, with a tight script and strong backing, lost its funding days before the first shoot. The producers were vague. Too risky right now. Hey, shift in strategy. Empty phrases, spoken like rehearsed apologies. Point one by one, the lights began to dim. What he had once taken for granted, meetings, callbacks, old friends in the business, started fading like stars at dawn. Nobody said anything directly. Nobody accused. Nobody explained. But the silence was loud and familiar. Keanu began to recognize the same silence from the calls at 3:17 a.m. The same breath. The same echo of something unspoken. Something watching. He found himself walking through his own world like a ghost. Not blacklisted. Not defamed. Simply erased. There were no warnings. Only absence. Then came the charity campaign. Months earlier, Keanu had lent his name and time to a children's arts foundation. Quiet work. Real work. He helped raise millions, spoke at schools, visited shelters. 4 months after that dinner, he received an email with just one sentence. The board has decided to move in a different direction. His name was removed from all materials. No calls. No explanations. Later, through a quiet tip, he discovered the campaign had received a massive anonymous donation the week before. The new face of the campaign? An actor known for his sudden rise. One who had been seen, frequently, in Diddy's circle. That was the first time Keanu felt something inside him fracture. This was not paranoia. This was design. The world wasn't attacking him. It was pulling away, as if he had stepped on a minefield and no one wanted to stand nearby. Friends who used to call weekly had gone silent. Invitations stopped arriving. Studio doors closed so gently, he barely noticed until they no longer opened, and no one asked why. They already knew it. At a charity banquet weeks later, Keanu stood alone at the bar, black tux sharp, tie knotted perfectly. He sipped a drink and tried to pretend he was still in orbit. That was when she approached a well-known actress, someone he had worked with in the past, someone who once called him the most grounded man in Hollywood. She leaned in, eyes soft, voice barely above. A whisper. "You said no, didn't you?" Keanu didn't answer. She waited, just long enough to let the words land. Then she smiled and walked away. That smile broke something. Not because it was cruel, but because it was kind. She knew. She had been there. Or somewhere near it. Enough to recognize the shape of his silence. Enough to mourn the price of truth. Keanu began to notice them. Cars that did not belong on his street. Black SUVs parked too long, too still, with windows tinted darker than the law allowed. He would walk his dog late at night and feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing against his back. Not the stare of paparazzi or fans, but something colder. Professional. Clinical. At first, he ignored it. Then he started taking pictures. One night, he approached a vehicle directly. The engine was off. The driver never rolled down the window, never moved, just sat in the shadows. When Keanu returned inside, a new envelope was waiting at his door, NO stamp. No seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, coarse and aged, like something from a monastery or a museum. The writing was in the same elegant gold ink. "You walked away from a ritual. Do you think that leaves you untouched?" The note wasn't signed. That night, he did not sleep. He sat in his living room in the dark, the note on the table in front of him, the stone from the dinner still in the drawer upstairs. He had not touched it since, but he could still feel its weight. That same week, he received another call. It was not at 3:17. It was from a name he recognized, the director, one of the few who had still spoken to him. A filmmaker he had collaborated with before. A man who made movies about impossible choices and hidden wars. They met in a quiet cafe in Los Feliz. The director looked nervous, checking the windows, glancing at his phone. "I don't know what you walked away from," he said after ordering nothing. But whatever it was, it scared the right people. Keanu leaned back. "What does that mean?" The director paused. "It means I can't work with you anymore. Not because I don't want to, but because someone up the ladder told me not to." There was no bitterness in his tone, only resignation. As though they were both pawns trying not to disturb the board. Before leaving, the director added one last thing. "I got offered something once. Not like yours. Not so direct. But enough to know there are rooms in this town you don't want to walk into unless you're ready to burn who you are." Then he stood, placed a hand on Keanu's shoulder, and left. Keanu sat alone, outside. A man in a gray hoodie passed the window. He was not looking at his phone. He was looking at the cafe, at Keanu. Their eyes met.no reaction. The man kept walking, but the message was received. He was not being warned anymore, that he was being watched. It was not a blacklist. It was a vanishing. A quiet, efficient unraveling. Keanu started to understand that the system did not punish with noise. It punished with absence. Like a photograph that fades one layer at a time, until even the memory of color disappears. Scripts stopped arriving. His agent, a man who had been by his side for decades, stepped down without warning. The email was brief, taking time for family. 2 weeks later, the agency reassigned Keanu's representation to someone half his age who never returned a single call. At first, Keanu thought it was mismanagement. Bad timing. Industry fatigue. Then the studio meetings evaporated, not canceled, erased. He would show up at an office only to be told the meeting was moved, with no reschedule. People who once smiled when they saw him now avoided eye contact. Former co-stars walked past him on red carpets as though they had never shared scenes, never traded laughs between takes. The warmth was gone. But more than that, the recognition. It was as if the town had agreed to forget him. There were no tabloids, no rumors, no scandal. Just silence. Clean, clinical silence. That was the genius of it. No one could point to anything. No controversy. No accusations. No social media firestorm. And yet, his phone never rang. His inbox was empty. He stopped being invited. Not just to events, but to belonging. One afternoon, Keanu stood outside a studio gate, scheduled to shoot a small role in a rising director's film. The call sheet had his name on it. The wardrobe had been fitted. The lines had been rehearsed. The guard looked at him, confused. "You've been replaced." Keanu blinked. "I wasn't told." The guard shrugged. "Sometimes that happens." No explanation. No apology. It just happened. On his way back to the car, he saw a woman approaching. With a clipboard, another assistant, maybe. She caught his eye as they passed. Just before she turned away, she said softly, under her breath, "They pulled you from the grid," and kept walking. That night, Keanu sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the gold-lettered card from the dinner. Loyalty is tested in water, that he whispered to himself. It's not about being punished. It's about being erased. Not loudly, not publicly, but with surgical precision. He opened a drawer and pulled out the black stone he had kept hidden all this time. It sat cold in his palm, small, smooth, but impossibly heavy. He did not cry if he did not rage, but something inside him fractured, because now he understood. The ritual had never needed his permission, only his silence, and by refusing to bathe, he had told the system something far more dangerous than no. He had said, "I see you." The message came through someone he barely knew anymore, that a cinematographer he had worked with a decade ago. A brief text. No greeting. "If you want to understand the system, come see the vault." No context. No location, just a name, a time, and the promise of revelation. Keanu should have ignored it. But curiosity has a way of creeping through even the thickest walls of self-preservation. 3 days later, he was led, without words, into the heart of Beverly Hills. The car that picked him up had no plates. The driver did not speak. The glass was tinted so dark it felt like night inside, even at noon. They arrived at a penthouse, no sign on the door. No concierge. No windows. It did not feel like a home. It felt like a chamber of secrets. Keanu was ushered into a sterile, dimly lit room. No art. No furniture. Just the low hum of machinery and a wall of matte black drawers. Row after row after row, stretching from floor to ceiling like filing cabinets from some Orwellian dystopia. Waiting, Diddy stood near the back of the room, flanked by no one. He looked different, not older, not tired, just clean. Too clean. As if whatever filth he trafficked in never touched his surface. "You wanted answers," Diddy said. Keanu remained silent. Diddy gestured toward the drawers. "Everyone has leverage. I just keep mine tidy." Then he turned and walked slowly, past the wall of black drawers, tapping one with his index finger. A name was printed there in delicate silver script. A name Keanu recognized. A name that was sacred in Hollywood. "I never have to open them," Diddy said, smiling. "The fear is enough." Keanu's stomach nodded. The realization was instant. These drawers were not just symbolic. They were weapons, insurance, records, NDAs, videos, contracts, emails, secrets, proof. And then Diddy turned back to him. "If you had gone into the bath, you'd have your drawer too." Keanu didn't move. Diddy took a step closer. "You don't even have to say anything. Just be present. Let the room know where you stand. We'll write the silence into your legacy." Keanu looked at the man. This was not a pitch. It was a threat. In velvet gloves. And for the first time, he noticed something that shook him even more than the vault itself. Diddy believed it. The ceremony, the water, the legacy, all of it. This wasn't about power anymore. It was about faith. Diluted. Ritualistic. Absolute. Keanu took a slow breath. No, the word was so soft it barely stirred the air, but it was firm. Immovable. Diddy's expression never changed. But his tone did. "Silence is loyalty," he said as the elevator doors opened behind Keanu. The words followed him down, echoing long after he left the vault. Keep that in mind. And Keanu knew. He had not escaped. He had been marked, not for death, for disappearance. The message came through someone he barely knew anymore, that a cinematographer he had worked with a decade ago. A brief text. No greeting. "If you want to understand the system, come see the vault." No context. No location, just a name, a time, and the promise of revelation. Keanu should have ignored it. But curiosity has a way of creeping through even the thickest walls of self-preservation. 3 days later, he was led, without words, into the heart of Beverly Hills. The car that picked him up had no plates. The driver did not speak. The glass was tinted so dark it felt like night inside, even at noon. They arrived at a penthouse, no sign on the door. No concierge. No windows. That it did not feel like a home. That it felt like a chamber of secrets. Keanu was ushered into a sterile, dimly lit room. No art. No furniture. Just the low hum of machinery and a wall of matte black drawers. Row after row after row, stretching from floor to ceiling like filing cabinets from some Orwellian dystopia. Waiting, Diddy stood near the back of the room, flanked by no one. He looked different, not older, not tired, just clean. Too clean. As if whatever filth he trafficked in never touched his surface. You wanted answers, Diddy said. Keanu remained silent. Diddy gestured toward the drawers. Everyone has leverage. I just keep mine tidy. Then he turned and walked slowly, past the wall of black drawers, tapping one with his index finger. A name was printed there in delicate silver script. A name Keanu recognized. A name that was sacred in Hollywood. I never have to open them, Diddy said, smiling. The fear is enough. Keanu's stomach nodded. The realization was instant. These drawers were not just symbolic. They were weapons, insurance, records, NDAs, videos, contracts, emails, secrets, proof. And then Diddy turned back to him. If you had gone into the bath, you'd have your drawer too. Keanu didn't move. Diddy took a step closer. You don't even have to say anything. Just be present. Let the room know where you stand. We'll write the silence into your legacy. Keanu looked at the man. This was not a pitch. It was a threat. In velvet gloves. And for the first time, he noticed something that shook him even more than the vault itself. Diddy believed it. The ceremony, the water, the legacy, all of it. This wasn't about power anymore. It was about faith. Diluted. Ritualistic. Absolute. Keanu took a slow breath. No, the word was so soft it barely stirred the air, but it was firm. Immovable. Diddy's expression never changed. But his tone did. Silence is loyalty, he said as the elevator doors opened behind Keanu. The words followed him down, echoing long after he left the vault. Keep that in mind. And Keanu knew. He had not escaped. He had been marked, not for death, for disappearance. It was a gala point, one of those charity events in Los Angeles where the champagne never runs dry, and the air smells like expensive perfume and filtered lies. Keanu arrived out of obligation, not desire. His name was still on the guest list, out of habit, not relevance. He wore the tux, smiled for the cameras, played the part of the man who had not been fading. Inside, the ballroom was radiant. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across silk gowns and tailored suits. Waiters moved like shadows, glasses clinking in their hands. Keanu made his way to the bar, his movements slow, deliberate, like someone walking across a frozen lake, unsure how deep the cracks ran. He stood alone, fingers curled around a half-finished drink, eyes scanning the room with polite detachment. Familiar faces passed by, most avoiding eye contact. A few nodded. None stopped. Then she appeared. An actress, beloved, bankable, a name that lit up marquees. Keanu had worked with her once, years ago, before she ascended. She looked the same, elegant, poised, magnetic. But her eyes, they held something ancient. A knowledge she carried like a scar beneath flawless skin. She drifted beside him, said nothing at first. Then, without turning, you said no, didn't you? Her voice was silk over steel, soft enough to be missed, sharp enough to pierce. Keanu froze. The question was not casual. It was a password he did not answer. He did not need to. She smiled, just slightly, then stepped away. But in that moment, Keanu felt something crack open. Not fear. Recognition. In her eyes, he saw not judgment, not pity, but reflection. She had been at the door, maybe even stepped through it. Maybe she had chosen differently. But she knew the cost either way. That small exchange did more than any threat or warning. It told him he was not insane, that the silence had shape, that others walked through it, cloaked in jewels and applause, but never speaking of what it cost to shine in this town. And for the first time in weeks, Keanu felt something like calm. Not safety, but clarity. The bath had been a symbol. But the real ritual was the surrender of the self, and he had refused, and he was not alone. The courtroom felt like a stage built for confession. Rows of wooden benches gleamed under white fluorescent lights. Reporters hunched over their notepads. Cameras, banned inside, waited like vultures outside the courthouse. And at the front, behind the long defense table, sat Diddy, dressed impeccably in charcoal gray, unbothered, unmoving. But his eyes darted, just once. When Keanu Reeves entered, the door clicked shut behind him. The gallery shifted in their seats, and in that moment, the temperature dropped. Keanu wore a plain suit. No entourage, no stylist. His hair tied back, his jaw unshaven, his presence unvarnished. He took the oath. Then the judge nodded. The prosecutor asked only one question. Mr. Reeves, can you tell us why you're here today? Keanu's fingers interlaced on the witness stand that he looked out, not just at the lawyers or the jurors, but at the gallery itself. At the industry watching from behind designer glasses and polite nods. At the fear dressed in Gucci and Dior. And he spoke, slowly, clearly. I said no. A pause, and I disappeared for it. The courtroom stilled. One of the jurors leaned forward, pencil frozen midair. Keanu continued. I was offered something. Legacy. Immortality. But it came with a price. And that price wasn't metaphorical. It wasn't artistic. It was flesh. It was silence. It was ritual. He described the dinner, the candles, the bath, the stone. Diddy's voice echoing in the dark. Loyalty is tested in water. Gasps rustled through the room like wind in a dying forest. Keanu didn't flinch. He recounted the second meeting, the vault, the drawers with names, the promise that even silence could be documented, measured, owned. And then he said the sentence that made the courtroom shiver. I would rather fade into oblivion than be remembered for stepping into your water. Diddy's jaw clenched. His eyes dropped. The silence was deafening. And then the objections came, rapid, desperate, shouted from Diddy's legal team. Speculative. Irrelevant. Hearsay. But the judge held up a hand. Let him finish. And so he did. Keanu spoke of the calls. The 3:17 a.m. breaths. The cars. The charity stripped of his name. The film roles that vanished without a trace. He spoke of the actress at the gala. The director who said, you scared the right people. He spoke of being erased, not punished. I didn't come here for revenge, he said quietly. I came here because the truth deserves light, even if it burns. One juror dabbed at a tear. Another wrote furiously. Keanu turned once, just once, to face Diddy directly. And in that moment, the courtroom ceased being a chamber of LAWIT became a mirror, reflecting everything Hollywood had hidden beneath its gold-plated glamour. They called for a recess, but no one moved. The judge left the bench. The stenographer rubbed her eyes. Reporters rushed out into the hallway, thumbs tapping furiously across screens, sending fragments of Keanu's testimony into the bloodstream of the internet. But inside the courtroom, time seemed to pause. Diddy remained in his seat, still, expression unreadable. His lawyers whispered urgently, flipping through folders as if law could undo what had just been spoken. The A-listers who had shown up in support were gone. Their front row seats now cold, empty, abandoned like stage props after a play no one wanted to remember. Keanu sat back in the witness chair. His hands rested calmly in his lap. He had nothing left to say. And yet, the silence he left behind said everything, because his story had done more than expose one man. It had shattered a mirror. A mirror everyone in that room had once looked into to measure themselves. That a quiet message was passed to the judge's clerk, that a court officer whispered something into a bailiff's ear. The machinery of justice was shifting, but slower now, more deliberate, cautious, because what had been said could not be heard. It was not about Diddy anymore. It was about all of them. Every deal signed behind closed doors. Every ritual accepted in silence. Every person who had walked into the bath without question and emerged clean, praised, crowned. Keanu had given them something rare, not evidence, not proof, but doubt. And in an industry built on illusion, doubt was poisoned. As he stepped down from the stand, a few people stood in the gallery, not out of applause, but something deeper, recognition, fear, gratitude. That he walked toward the exit. A reporter snapped a final photo. A sketch artist dropped her pencil. Hands shaking. The heavy doors swung open. Keanu paused. He turned, glanced once more at the courtroom he had just set on fire, then said quietly, the only reason I'm still here is because I said no. And with that, he disappeared into the hallway, leaving behind a legacy not built in contracts, but in defiance, not in water, but in truth.